is to vote for the amended
yes.
motion?
Yep.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll take my opportunity to speak now. And I agree with the amendment. It's a technical tidying up, but probably of some significance. I'd just like to go back a step. This process had its genesis with government's introduction of national standards for freshwater management some years ago, which required regional councils specifically to improve water quality. And this requirement was mirrored in the community by a public perception that water quality in the Tuki was degrading, particularly during summer dries. So to rectify this required regulatory measures, including things such as, importantly, increasing minimum flows, which without supplementation of water supply from other sources such as water storage would mean reduction of irrigation, reduced agricultural production, and significant decline in the region's economy. And in fact, if Plan Change 6 goes through pretty much as it is, and if the dam does not proceed, then that is the fate of this region, a significant decline in the region's economy. I hope that doesn't happen. Now, I've observed and been part of the process of working up this project and the plan change over the past 5 years. In my long business and local government career, I've never seen a project or plan so thoroughly analysed, studied, restudied, peer-reviewed and contested. It runs the risk of being overcooked and made too complex. The reality is that the conditions precedent and the other conditions surrounding it give more than adequate protection, and the issue, in my mind, is simple. It's not complex. Those conditions have to be met for it to proceed. Now, in the recent submissions from the public, I had some queries and concerns were raised, but I've made inquiries and I'm satisfied. And as I said before, I'm satisfied with the safeguards explicit in the conditions precedent, which must be met. I recall at the submissions the other day, one submitter defined procrastination as waiting for a perfect solution. Now, there is no perfect solution unless you have a crystal ball that works, and none of us has. I don't intend to procrastinate, and accordingly I'm pleased to support the resolution as amended.
Thank you. Well,
Chairman, can I just speak to the amendment and nothing else,
Yeah,
please?
speak to the
Because we
amendment.
have an amendment.
Yes.
At the moment, we have an amendment which is actually totally contradictory. We have a minimum of 40 million cubic metres with an agreement to supply 40 cubic metres. I'm sorry, but it's quite possible that by the time financial close, we have 50 million cubic metres of water sold. I'm sorry, that as it stands is a very limiting. So I couldn't possibly agree with a condition that actually contradicted what the first part of the clause said with the second.
Councillor Balfour, do you wish to speak?
For the amendment, my understanding is the additional language is to address the point that even were 50 million cubic meters signed up for, their distribution across the various footprints of this scheme could be such that it was grossly uneconomic to actually provide the hookups necessary. So on the one hand, the purchase agreements that are, if they are in fact incapable of being met because they're over here, over there, down here, across over there, that's a serious issue. So I think you do need to make clear, you need to satisfy both sides of the equation.
Councillor Pipe.
Is it possible to put minimum in there? So a minimum of 40 million cubic metres, which then aligns it with the previous statement.
You're into gearbox.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. Other speakers? On the amendment, yes. I'll speak against the amendment on the basis that it is part of the conditionality of the agreement, and it does not need to be represented at a council decision level, because in theory we should bring everything up to a council decision level if that's what's required. It's conditionality in the agreement, that's where it should stay, and I'm sorry I cannot support the amendment. If there's no further speakers, you wish to sum it?
Well, I still feel strongly about this because it was something that I had always assumed when I looked at this, that the 40 million cubic metres commitment to would automatically be supplied. That was my assumption. I think that's the assumption people had. It was only when I questioned senior staff of the HBRC did it come to light that they may not supply a number of people. So because they're simply at the outer extremities and the cost of piping and cost of channeling is too great and it's uneconomic. So we might have on the one hand contracts to take 40 million cubic metres, but the RWLP might only actually have decided to supply 38 million cubic metres. Well, I want to be clear about this. If 40 million cubic metres of water is what's necessary, ticking through and paid for to make this scheme work, well then that's what it's got to be. What I'm concerned about is if this decision is delegated, someone could say, well, we've got contracts for 40 million cubic metres. We're not necessarily going to supply them, but, well, we're pretty close and we think the uptake's going to be great along, and take a punt on our behalf, bet against the bank. Now, if the bet pays off, no problem. But if the uptake is not, then we're left with a scheme which has less income than we thought. That's my issue. I'm just trying to be conservative and protect the interests of the ratepayer and the regional council here. I'm not trying to necessarily interfere on things, but to say this is a concern I have. Now, if you vote against it and it's not there, well, let me tell you, when it comes back to the later meeting, we consider this, I will be requiring a decision to demonstration of this, regardless. If it can't have it, I will vote emphatically against it. I've not made a decision to vote emphatically against it at all. I've said I'm open to persuasion.
Thank you for that summing up. So I'll put the amendment, we're just talking about the amendment here alone. I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And against. So it's carried, now becomes part of the substantive motion. Canny old politician, you've got 10 minutes, you've got 15 minutes, you get another 5 if you need it. You're good? Okay. So, Councillor Bevan, let's continue around with what is now the substantive motion, which
Okay,
I'd
so
like
we're
people
now
to finish
talking
speaking
to the amended motion. Okay. Yep, okay. Right, firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the people of Central Hawke's Bay who have turned out here to support their district. That's how I see their presence. And they did the same thing last week back in their home patch. I admire your passion and commitment to try and get this project off the ground and your vision to try and see it through. So well done to you. I'm very pleased to see your commitment to your part of our region. Several councillors sitting around this table have been labelled as being anti-dam by some elements of Hawke's Bay and the press. I'm from the horticulture industry. I've been in the apple industry for 20 years. So I do understand the importance of water, and I do understand its importance to the Hawke's Bay economy. I'm pro-water storage. I'm conditionally pro-dam, or some other version of it, provided that the business and environmental case makes sense. But I have found myself, since I've been elected, in the middle of some lamentable processes, and this motion today, before it was amended, was one of them. And I make no apology for asking lots of questions and being satisfied myself rather than relying on the advice of others. Now it is clear from the amended motion that the final decision rests with us, the Regional Council, in line with our commitment to the public and our responsibilities as councillors, I can support the motion. There are still many parts that need to be crystallised before this gets a final tick from us. In fact, not a single condition precedent has yet been met. We will get a glimpse of one of these tomorrow when the Board of Inquiry releases its final report. But there is much to be done, and there are many bridges to be crossed before we know we have a project. But I want to say to the people of Central Hawke's Bay, even if this does fall over on one of the conditions precedent, that's not the end of the possibility of water storage in your region. It's still a critical project in my mind for the future economy of Hawke's Bay. So I will support this motion today.
Thank you. Well, I'll keep. You are the seconder. You're happy to speak now, Councillor Pott? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I am quite happy to speak now. I'm a glass half full person rather than a glass half empty. I'm positive, and I try to look at a broader view of what is going to be of benefit to the whole of Hawke's Bay. And I don't come to the decision that I have come to lightly, and I'm very pleased to be the seconder of this motion. Some of us around this table have been accused of being hell-bent on getting the dam, and I would just like to say that nothing is further from the truth. As far as I'm concerned, since becoming a member here of the council for over 6 months, I think I've been immersed in the project and the detail of the project. I think that this particular project must be about one of the most researched projects that this council has ever gone through. There's a weight of documents. What we have in our agenda, the appendices, is only just but a fraction of all the documents and the reports that we have. We've had this huge body of knowledge and research. We've had it questioned. We've had it checked, peer-reviewed and commented on by a huge range of experts, including the Board of Inquiry. Along with that, we've had some excellent submissions that we've heard. Many of those submissions, both for and against, excellent submitters that we've heard and we've read. And I guess over the time that I've been on council, I've heard numerous views from the public and the general way in which we interact with them out there. This recommendation that we are going to be voting on has a number of conditions, the conditions precedent, and as far as I'm concerned, that's the key. Those conditions basically are dependent on a whole range of things. For instance, the Board of Inquiry result, what is going to be said there, will depend on a number of things where the farmers will have to make up their mind whether it's going to be economic for them. That will decide whether they're going to sign up. Whether they sign up for that is going to depend on their own, looking at their own economic viability on their particular farm. It is an investment, and I want to just make that quite clear, and it was made clear before. It's not a handout, as been said in some of the reports. It's not a handout to the farmers. They're paying for this. And the other thing that I find very interesting is that this $80 million that we're looking at, up to $80 million, we could have it sitting in an interest-bearing account, but we're actually using it in this way for the benefit of generations to come. Not only will we get a return from the water storage scheme, but we'll also get an increased return to the ratepayers from the Port of Napier as well. So water storage, as has been said, is going to provide security of supply to the irrigators. That in turn opens up a whole range of things, new farming opportunities, new crops for Central Hawke's Bay, and the global demand for food that we've seen will encourage investors to take a look at various other opportunities that they can do with food production. It's going to generate economic activity, and as we've seen when we went down central and southern Hawke's Bay, southern Canterbury, we saw the effects of what water can actually do down there in irrigation. We've seen population growth down there, reduced unemployment, school rolls that are just growing, incredible. And of course that means more teachers. Okay, so a lot of things are happening, but most important why we did this was because of the environmental impacts and the environmental improvements that we can make to the river. So I reckon that this can be a game changer for us, an economic igniter for Hawke's Bay, wide multi-generational benefits. However, it still is only a decision, one step towards achieving those conditions precedent that have to be met. So I believe that it's a very important decision that we have to make. We have to show strong leadership in this decision. We have to send a message to the community, to the primary sector, to the investors. We need to give them confidence that this project is achievable. And that's why I'm very happy to second this motion.